Hi, it's Bobbie from Fifth Avenue Cakes, and I thought it would be fun to show you how to do some bas relief. This time we're going to be doing it on a sugar cookie, but you can do it on a cupcake or a cake. So I will explain, and let's begin. The idea of laying down a foundation with some sort of fondant to make your design and give it a three-dimensional appearance. It can be done on a cookie, it can be done on a cupcake, as I said, and it can also be done on a cake. I thought to get you just started on it, we would do it on a cookie. You can do it on any size, that's why I showed you the circle cookies, and now we're going to do it on the fancy square. And you can pretty much do whatever type of mold you want. We're going to mostly be working with this floral autumn swag that has sunflowers and leaves and some berries in it because it's autumn, and I thought it would be perfect if you want to do something like this for your Thanksgiving table. I've decided to use a cameo for the center, so I have several different cameos I can choose from. When picking a cameo mold, you just want to go with one that you like and is pretty flexible so that it's easy for you to release your fondant or gum paste when you are ready to take it out. And then we might be adding in just some flowers from this particular mold. Now this mold is much stiffer, so it's a little bit harder to get it out, but it can be done. And that's something to keep in mind when you're purchasing your molds, is you really want them to be of a good high food grade silicone, and you want them to be pretty flexible. There are some awesome ones out there that are not flexible and you can work with them, just know it's going to take a little more time. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the cameo first. I'm going to move the cookie out of the way so you can see how we're going to do the cameo, and I have right now fallen in love with this one. Now because my cookie is covered with fondant, you can use royal icing if you choose. I just decided to do fondant. If you decide to do royal icing, you're going to want to attach your bas relief with royal icing and not water so you don't destroy your sugar. And I'm going to do this mold a little bit different than we normally do molds. I'm going to do it in tiny little sections because first of all, I want my fondant to be very thin since we already have so much fondant on there. But also with the mold, with the cameo, I want just the little girl or the woman to be white. I don't want any other of the blank spots to show up with the white. So I'm going to work the fondant so that I do have that. And I'm gently using my Dresden tool to push down the fondant away from the blank space that I do not want the white to be in. And since you're not going to be seeing the back of this, I'm not worried about it looking patched. I'm more concerned that my cameo comes out without having any of that white where I don't want it. So you have to look at your cameo and make sure that you're just staying in the indented lines, that you're not coming out of those at all. And you don't have to use a cameo, you could do anything you want. You could put a giant sunflower in there, a rose, whatever is your favorite type of applique. You could do a scroll, a really pretty scroll or a fleur-de-lis. I just thought this would be real elegant and fun to do. If your mold is new, you want to take just a little bit of Crisco, and when I say a little bit, I mean just a smidge on your hand, and I will show you that when I go to use one of these other molds, just so that it will release. So you're going to condition it the first time. Think of it like when you get your wooden cutting boards home, you condition it that first time, and then generally you don't have to condition it again. So I'm going to turn this and make sure that I'm getting all the pieces of her in here and not getting anything that I don't want. And there are some little teeny like hairs and stuff play with it. If you want to, even if you have a little bit of holes going on in the hair, that's fine. You just, like I said, do not want to be coming out of that area at all. And as always, when you're not using your fondant, you want to keep it sealed in a bag. And then I'm going to give it a back so it doesn't look strange. And I'm going to go with the exact same color I'm working with. I'm trying to stay very toned in there. I don't want to use a lot of color. I want to keep that elegance to it. I might dust it, but I don't want a lot of color going on. And this is probably way too big. And to get it as thin as I want, I'm just conditioning this a little. I'm going to, and normally you wouldn't do this for a mold, but I found this to be the easiest way to get it the thinness that I wanted. Actually, that's not enough, so let's just add a tiny bit more. And then tear it off as I go, and I'll show you what I mean as I do it. So normally you want to, as I've said before, gauge your piece of fondant or gum paste so that it fits in that mold almost perfectly and you're not having to take any off. In this instance, you don't want to do that. Or at least I find it to be a little bit easier. And I want, of course, my fondant to be even. So that's obviously way too big, but it is, as you can see, very thin. So I'm going to put it into the cameo, and I'm going to take my finger around the cameo so that the line, the indentation of that line shows, and I'm going to work it until it just starts ripping on its own. And that happens pretty fast. It's pretty easy. And then I'll soften that out. So go around with your finger just to make sure you don't have any jagged edges. You want it to be nice and smooth. And once you're satisfied with your medallion, turn it over and gently just lift her straight out. And she should come out looking pretty perfect. And that one doesn't even need any help. She's great. So the white is where I want the white to be. And I'm going to just show it on here before I put it on here, make sure it's positioned. But I do want you to see. So all the places I want the white are there, and all the places that I wanted my darker color are covering her back. And really that just takes maybe 1 or 2 times of practice, or it does help sometimes just to actually make a dummy mold, so to speak, so you can look at it and know if you're having trouble telling where the lines are, where her face is. So you want to put her in the center and gently put her down. I've just used my finger and a little bit of water, I realized I didn't tell you what I was doing, to dampen the back. You can use a brush. I actually saw Maggie Austin, I got the idea from her. She used her finger, and it, as she said, it gives a little bit more control. Now with the side of your Dresden tool, very carefully attach your little medallion piece now, your cameo, to your cookie. And I'm going to do a little bit different of a design on here. I'm going to use the exact same molds. But this time I'm going to do more of a framing of her rather than coming up to her completely, just to show you there are so many different styles that you can do. So we're done with that mold. We're not going to use it anymore. So the next mold we're going to use is this one, and I am going to use the same color that I used for the back of my medallion. Maybe a tad lighter if I have some in here. And I like to look at my pieces to see how they're going to look on there. I don't want to get it on and think it's that's a little too light. So I'm just going to mix it with this little dark piece. And I am working right now with Fonderific fondant. I love the, I think I've told you this several times before, I love the mocha and cinnamon, and I mix it, and it almost makes you think you're eating a cinnamon roll with a cup of coffee. And it actually is my daughter's and husband's favorite flavor. So that's probably the color I want. And this is much more of a piece than I want. Now, what I didn't tell you before was you might need to use a little bit of cornstarch if your fondant is sticky. So I'm going to start with my biggest pieces first, and then I'll show you how you can bring in other designs. So I actually like this part in the center here, and I'm going to work my way up. I want this to be very, very thin, so I'm going to be working it so that it's extremely thin, which is very important that your mold is conditioned, because you're going to be so thin in some areas it's actually hopefully going to look a little bit ripped, but it won't on the cookie or on your cake, depending on what you pick. And let me just move the cookie out of the way so we don't have any damage and you can see what I'm doing. I'm just working the fondant. Now, because we're going to be eating these cookies, I'm strictly using fondant, but these molds can be used with gum paste. Now, if you're going to do this all over a cake, I would not suggest doing even a 50-50 mix. I would totally just do your fondant. But if it's going to be a part of the cake, maybe the base of it that someone's not going to eat, I would then go ahead and use gum paste. If it rips a little bit, that's perfectly fine. We want to get this as thin as we possibly can. I'm just tearing off those edges. And where I think it's a little bit too thick, I'm taking that away. When you are using the cornstarch on your finger, be careful not to get it on the mold, because these molds are made to pick up the impression, and if you have a glob of cornstarch, or when you're conditioning a glob of Crisco, you're obviously not going to be picking up your design. So I'm just working this in. Alright, and when you have it exactly how you like it, and this particular mold is a little bit stiffer than the other mold, so I'm going to gently just encourage my piece to come out. You don't want to really pull on it because you'll lose your design. So let me put this back down so we don't do anything to damage that. I'll work on the other edge. Sometimes they pop straight out, and other times you kind of have to coax them. So it looks like we lost that, but that's alright. So I'm going to take this piece, and you just want to gauge where you think it might look great. And I think right there would be perfect with the flowers coming around like so. I like to check the position and make sure that that's exactly where I want the piece to go before I commit to putting the water down. And what I do like about using the Fonderific also for this is it gives you a little bit of time before it starts to crack and harden on you. So you can play with it a little bit and you can mold it how you want it to be. And I think I really like that. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to turn him over very gently and take my finger and just put a little bit of water on. And as you know, you don't want to douse it in water. You just want to be sure to get those ends where it's going to have contact, or where the contact's going to mean the most. So really get the edges, not the ends, the edges of your selected piece. And use your favorite mold. You definitely do not have to go with anything like what I picked. You have some molds at home that you've been trying to figure out what you want to do with, or you really like the way they look. Once you get it on, you can just attach it, make sure everything is, nothing's up, everything is down. And as you can see, because we worked so thinly, we get great detail out of our mold. Now because the mold was giving me a little bit of a problem coming out, I'm going to condition it, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now as soon as I get him in. So to condition your mold, it's very simple. You just want to take a little bit of Crisco, like that much, just enough to make your finger shiny, and gently rub it into your mold. And that's it. Nothing more than that. You don't want to be able to see the white pieces. So we're going to do the other side. And I think I'm going to use more of the leaf side for the other side than the little berries. And I'm going to show you another way to make sure that you don't have too much fondant going on, that we keep it very, very thin. So if you take little pieces, just like we did with the cameo, and work the little piece until it's super, super thin. You can almost see the mold breaking through. And like I said, it's okay to have a little bit of ripping and tearing going on. It actually gives a nice appearance when it goes on. And hopefully now that I've conditioned it, it's a little bit sticky, so I'm just dipping my fingers in some cornstarch and working it down. I'm also not going to make this side as long as that side. I'm going to keep it a little bit off balance so they're not completely even. And again, you can work with, I've worked with Satin Ice doing this, I've worked with Albert Ooster doing this, I've worked with Squires doing this. You can use any fondant you want. I chose this mostly for the flavor and because this way I don't have to keep putting it back in my bag as I'm working on my piece, because I know it won't get hard. Now that's not to say that you should keep your Fonderific fondant out overnight. Obviously that would be a bad idea. But it does give you a little extra time to work with it. So if you have a project that needs a little bit of extra time and you want a great flavor, this is the go-to fondant. I've said many times there's never one fondant that's perfect for every application. So I like to have a few hanging out with me. So I think that's about as long as we're going to go. I just want to take it across, get those beautiful leaves in there. And I'll make sure that all the edges are taken care of. Put this back in my bag. You can use any part of the mold that you want. If you want to just use that great big sunflower in the center, you could do that. We're going to be mixing and matching our molds. And like I said, if you wanted to add some beautiful overpiped royal icing scrolls in there, that would also be beautiful. I would do that more, I think, on a cake than a cookie. I think it might just be a little bit too cumbersome. but it gives a wonderful 3D effect. It gives that aha feeling to people where they're just like in awe, or that awe feeling, I should say. Alright, so just by conditioning it, you can see that it is not giving me, it's not struggling with me the way it was. I still have to coax it out. And that's something to think about when you're buying your molds. I specifically wanted this design, so I knew that this brand tends to be a little bit harder to get out. But I couldn't find this exact design in anything else. I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to put it on and see exactly how I want it to lay. I think I like that. Maybe come up just a smidge. So we'll go ahead and put this one on. So I'm going to dip my finger in the water. First impressions, their molds are always extremely flexible. Jennifer Dietz's molds are always extremely flexible. Those are great molds if you can get them. We carry some of them in our shop. Alright, so now that I have my two main big pieces on, I'm just going to go ahead and attach it. But if you, like I said, if you find a mold that you absolutely are in love with, but you know it's going to be hard to get it out, just give yourself some extra time. It can be done. So, and this one is extremely hard to get out. I'm going to show you how to play around with this one too. So I like this leaf right here a lot. It's a great filler mold or piece. So we're going to do the exact same thing. I think I'm going to condition it just to make sure. I know I'll probably be using this one, so I'll condition him. Now I told you you can use your Dresden tool to help you. I got a little piece of something right here. To help you coax your fondant. Be very careful. You don't want to damage or scratch your mold, because if you change it or you scratch it, then the design is going to look different and you'll have destroyed your mold and be very angry with me. So when you're using your Dresden tool, you want to use it gingerly. I didn't mean for my arm to go across, so I'll make sure to use this arm to grab my cornstarch. Also keep in mind the sizes that you're working with, and when you purchase a mold, really, if it's one on the internet, look at the size, and if it's in centimeters and you're used to inches, you might want to grab your ruler and take it out just to make sure it's going to be the size that will work for you, or it's something that isn't too big or too small. Or obviously if you're used to centimeters and it's an inch, the same thing. You just want to make sure you have the right size and something that you're going to be happy with. Now when you're purchasing a mold that you can't play with and feel, obviously you will not know if it has a lot of flexibility. But if you have some molds in your house, generally, okay, you're going to watch me just kind of really be rude to this mold, but I need to get him out, and as you can see, it's not very flexible. So I found my own little way of getting him out with my tiny hands. There we go. If you have a mold in your home or several versions of molds, generally the type of silicone will be the type that they always use. So if you like it, stay with that brand. You'll probably be happier. So I want to put a little piece right over here just to fill in that gap. I'm going to not go so close to the face like I did with the other one, but I like that leaf. I just want to make sure I wouldn't want it to go the other way, and I don't. So we're just putting our water on, and then I'm going to put it back in. Now you don't have to test yours every time. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and I want to make sure that it's going to fit before I put it on. It's something that I want. Like, do I mind this piece hanging off? And I don't. I'm just getting that as close as I can to the other one, so you can't tell where one stops and where one begins. And that's the idea when you're mixing these molds together, is to just really work with the pieces. You don't want to be able to tell where you start and where you stop. So I think we're going to do 2 more, and that's about it on this one. I like this little rose here a lot. The other thing to keep in mind when you are buying molds, if you're not buying them from a cake decorating store or you're buying them on Estasy, you want to make sure that they say food grade silicone. We don't want to harm anybody here. We want to make sure that we're giving people stuff that's safe to eat. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to bend him. Now, with most molds, I would not say do this because you might ruin your mold, but this is the only way I've found to get it out of this particular one. So he popped on out, and we didn't lose his design. I'm going to pick up my little rose. And I want to put her, or put the rose about there. I don't want to come too close, like I said, to the cameo. But I can see that there's a space right here where I can connect these 2 pieces. And it'll look like it belongs there. So I'm going to gently pick it up. And I'm going to use a brush for this one because it's so tiny. Do it the same way that you would do it as if you were using your finger. And like I said, if you don't want to use your fingers, you don't have to. You can use a brush, whichever you are comfortable with. So I want to get it right in where that flower ends. And same thing right here. So it looks like almost it was part of this mold. So we're just framing this one around. And then I'm going to put one on top and we will be done with our cookie. I'm going to go back to this mold and I'm just going to use from like here to here, I think. So the neat thing about bas relief, besides how beautiful and elegant it looks, is that you don't need a lot of materials. You just need some fondant, 1 or 2 molds, a little bit of water, and some cornstarch, and a Dresden tool if you have it. If you don't have a Dresden tool, you can use a brush. Just make sure that it's an artist brush that obviously has not been used on anything but food before, and you're going to want one that isn't super soft but not super firm, something in between. So you want it to be hard enough that you can push that fondant down and get it to connect. But that works just as well. So if you don't have a Dresden tool, you can use that. And then if you choose to, like I said, combine it with some beautiful royal icing piping, then you'll need a little bit of royal icing. If you are doing this on a royal icing cake or a royal icing covered cookie, you do not want to use water to attach it. You want to use your royal icing, and you want it to be rubbed down and smooth, and a very little amount, so that you cannot at all tell. If you start putting a lot of water on your royal icing, like I said, it will fall apart, so you don't want to do that. I don't need this little piece right here, so I'm going to gently get that out. Right there. Oh, my hand's a little sticky, so I'll get a little cornstarch. And that looks pretty good. So I'll let that sit for a second while I put this away. It's important that you keep your area nice and tidy. And we will release him. And that one came out pretty easily. Bring our cookie back in. And I will see how I want him to fit in here. I think just like that. If I go right over between that leaf will be good. I'm going to go ahead and use my finger. Go back and forth. Whichever's going to give me the most control for the piece I'm using. I want to get it right inside there. Just right there, so it looks like it's connected. And just a tad more. Come around. There we go. And I can use my tool to coax him where I exactly want him to be. When doing this, obviously you want to make sure that you don't take out your design when you're bringing your tool in. You just want to connect it. So right about there, I'm going to connect that piece right there and take that one down right there. I'm going to bring this into that little space right there. Now as you can see, this is done with a little bit of a different design. I left it a little bit more open. You can do whatever you want when you're doing bas relief. Just make sure you like the molds that you're working with and put them together. So I will see you next time, and maybe this will be on your Thanksgiving table.